Welcome, everyone. This is a really cool and special opportunity here where Lewis and myself get to talk to the legendary Brian Schmidt, who's got insane 35 plus years in the industry. And I can't believe it, this number is amazing. 150 plus arcade and video games for companies including EA, Sega, Data East, Namco, Capcom, and Digital Dreams Entertainment. That is an absolutely insane number. And on top of that, Brian, you've also designed game sound chips for consoles and arcades. And of course, one of the biggest things, which is why we're here today as well, is Brian has created the biggest game audio conference in the world, which is called GameSoundCon, and it's reaching its 15th anniversary this year, which is very exciting. And yeah, we'll be there for it, which is awesome. So if any of you in the chat are gonna be there, then we'll see each other. So yeah, welcome, Brian. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's looking forward to chatting with you all.
Yeah, same. And I just want to go into, before we start, like the fact that you've created sound chips. This is so cool. Like we've never even worked with sound chips.
So far out of my comfort zone.
We live in the blessed time of like Wise and game engines.
It was a different era back then, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. So to start off, first off, for people that don't know GameSoundCon, of course, it is a conference all about game audio. And I would love to know what made you want to organize the conference in the first place? Like, what was the initial thing that planted the seed and then got it to grow?
That's a great question. Thanks. And it's sort of, we're going to have a little bit of, I know Jamie was talking about, hey, game audio history. So we're going to go to a little game audio history. Back in 2000, 2001, there was a technological revolution that really changed game audio fundamentally, not just from an aesthetic perspective, but from a creative perspective and a business perspective. And it's kind of crazy because the technology seems kind of mundane. I would postulate that the introduction of the DVD as a game delivery mechanism was the game changer for game audio. That meant really for the first time we could seriously go and you didn't have to do the weird chip stuff that I did in the 80s and 90s. You could actually go to a studio and record stuff. Yes, you could do that with the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, because they shipped on compact disc. But what happened was developers learned pretty quickly, oh, well, I can put some full motion video on that, or I can have 3,000 lines of dialogue in my game now. And pretty soon the CD filled up with stuff that wasn't music. But when DVDs, because the CD can only handle about 680 or 700 megabytes. So it's not a lot. It seemed a lot at the time, but it's not really. When games started shipping on DVD with the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox, that's like 4.2 to 7.8 gigabytes. So that's when you could start saying, let's go to a studio. And when games started being able to have music, especially, also sound design, but music especially, where you could just go into a studio and you didn't need people with archaic buggy whip skills like me to do chiptune stuff, all of a sudden, lots of composers who were previously kind of shut out of games because they couldn't make a Yamaha 2151 make decent sounding music, but they could write for an orchestra. Now these composers were able to get into games. And at the time I was with Xbox, and one of my roles at Xbox was to, fly around and teach people, hey, here's the cool sound chip the Xbox has, here are the tools that we have, and here's kind of how game audio works in general. And because at that same time, we had a lot of people coming from more traditional media, they were all stumbling over the same things. They're all thinking, oh, a game must be just like a film. And we're sort of having to say, well, no, a game's not really just like a film. Here's how it's different. And that was kind of the spark for it. Again, we used to have these things called X-Fests, these developer conferences. And when I left Microsoft a few years later, one of the things I was thinking is, hey, I bet it would be useful to have some kind of event or some kind of resource that kind of did what I did when I was at Microsoft in terms of telling people, yeah, here's the differences between doing linear media and interactive media for both music and sound design. And so that was kind of the first idea of GameSoundCon, is that it was a single track, and it was really targeted at people coming from mostly Hollywood, you know, the traditional music production, sound production, and saying, here's what you kind of need to know as a bare minimum if you want to start being serious about games. So that's kind of where GameSoundCon came from, is leaving Microsoft and being, hey, I think this would be kind of a useful thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible also to hear about the technological shift and everything, because yeah, it's something that we've not experienced per se. I think what we're going to experience next is the AI shift.
Yep.
And that's a whole nother discussion. In terms of, like, obviously it started small. What was the most challenging thing right at the start? We know from our first time of putting on AirCon that yeah, it can be pretty crazy when you're trying to build something totally from scratch and you have no experience doing it.
I bet we could swap a lot of stories and we'd find that we ran into a lot of similar issues. If only we could have gone to a conference that taught us the differences between writing music and putting on conferences, that would have helped us all out a lot. Yeah, the challenging thing for me, which was actually also, I surprisingly discovered about myself, what I found kind of enervating and kind of interesting was just the, you know, having all of the aspects of a business, from planning and scheduling and marketing and promotion, and how many bagels do I need to order? You know, it's kind of ironic, because one of the reasons I left Microsoft is because how do I say it nicely? Microsoft likes very fungible people, where they can, hey, you worked on Excel this year, and we're going to put you on graphics next year. And they don't really, at the time, they didn't really like specialists that much. And so as I was being asked to do more things that had nothing to do with audio, it got less interesting. And then ironically, here I am literally trying to figure out how many bagels do I need to order for this conference. So yeah, I think it just the seeing all of the end to end, and having to, you know, I put together a spreadsheet with potential finances and where's the break even point, and what's the risk of, you know, this happening or that happening.
Out of interest, Brian, how many bagels do you have to order?
Shoot, I just had this up. I think I'm ordering like 50 dozen bagels, but then there's also, or 50 dozen bagels and pastries. Then there's also, you know, 9 dozen granola bars and assorted things. And like the coffee is measured in the high tens of gallons.
50 dozens of, that's a lot of bagels. Yeah, that is.
It's a lot of bagels. Yeah. So we bagels and muffins. Yeah.
I'm sure you probably go, sorry, I'm getting so off topic. I'm sure you probably go to a specialist website to get those, but I like to imagine you're just in a supermarket, just like scraping all the bagels into the trolley off the shelf, buying them all out in person.
Now you end up working with the events person, and I've come to appreciate the role that a good person at a venue, because that's their job, is to make our job as conference planners smooth. So you know, we just tell them we need this many bagels and they just show up. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I mean, like, it's interesting because we've entered this from a totally different perspective, which is the digital one. So we don't have to deal with a lot of the in-person logistics. So it's actually some stuff that I'd be curious to speak about a little later. But Hallie asks a great question. How many people, if you can remember, attended the very first GSC, sorry, GameSoundCon?
Yeah. So the first one, which was in LA, September 24th, 2009. So that's coming up on 15 years ago. I think it was 38 attendees, although we had another like 15 because at the time, at the very last minute, I added like a bunch of sessions for what at the time was called Rock Band Network. So Rock Band Network was this thing that Harmonix was trying to do, where you could author your own content for Rock Band. So in other words, you could, if you were an indie artist and you had your own song and you wanted a Rock Band player to be able to play your song in Rock Band, they had this thing they set up. So that added about another 15. So yeah, it was fairly small. We all fit in one room. It was 2 days, but it was just one room. Unfortunately, Helly, the Rock Band Network folded.
Oh no!
It was in order to put a song in a Rock Band format, it was a lot of work, and you had to have lots of really specialized details, which is why we did this training. So it was a really cool idea. It unfortunately never quite got off the ground. But yeah, so that was the first one. That's that year. I did another one in San Francisco about 2 months later, and that also had about 40 people.
Oh wow!
So yeah, for a time I was doing it twice a year.
Was it the same talks, or was it different talks?
This was back when I did like 80% of the talks.
Oh, okay, wow.
You must have
maybe not 80, maybe,
yeah.
but at least 50. And so my talks were generally the same, but then the other speakers would, I'd have different, keynote speakers and so on. But yeah, so that was, then it kind of grew from there.
So I know this is accessible information online, but how many is it now then? How much has it grown then from the initial 38 people?
Last year, and the online thing's been interesting too, because in 2020 we kind of had a problem, right? I had everything booked for, I had the venue booked for October, and then this COVID thing happened, and so we went totally online in 2020. So they were a bit of an anomaly. But last year we had in person 720 something with another 350 or so online.
Wow.
Fantastic.
So, and then that kind of blew out our expectations. I was expecting maybe 500. We were doing, I think, I was asking this, roughly 10 to 15% year-on-year growth in attendance. Except last year it was like 50% higher.
Wow,
that's really cool. Do you think there's any specific reason for that you can pinpoint?
I'm not sure. I've been trying to think that. We get a lot of repeats. But I think moving to Burbank helps. We were in downtown LA, and even though people fly in from Warsaw, well, some of the feedback I had from some of the LA people, it's like, oh, downtown LA is a little inconvenient. So moving to Burbank, I think, probably helped. And yeah, I'm still trying to figure out why the big jump last year, but I actually ended up cutting off registration because I was afraid that the space I had booked was going to get overwhelmed.
What a great problem to have. Fantastic.
Oh, interesting.
So jumping to present, which is what we've just done, what's the biggest challenge now?
One of the hardest things actually is turning down talks. It's the thing I really dislike about, it's my least favorite part of GameSoundCon, because we get about 4 times as many talks as we have room for. We get about 4 times as many submissions. And so the challenging part probably is, and most of them are pretty good, just about, I'd say 90% of them I could take, and there would be a quality talk with a quality speaker, and the audience would learn a lot of cool stuff. So for me, it's kind of doing the balance of the music with the technical, with the aesthetic and the business and the, how do you, when did we start doing this? Along the way, I stopped making GameSoundCon targeted just at sort of newbies into the industry, right? I'm a Hollywood TV composer. I want to do games. That was my market for a couple of years. And then I expanded to try and make it more like, okay, for people who have significant experience in games. And so kind of trying to balance out that, making it accessible for the composers and sound designers who maybe are new to games, but still having lots of interesting talks with some depth and meat where, if you don't know games, this talk is really kind of going to go over your head. So for me, making that balance is, and I've got I do it every year on the whiteboard, on my card table.
Oh, I love it.
I've tried various digital whiteboards and organizational things, and every time it's like colored Post-it notes on my card table.
Nice.
I'm a big Post-it note aficionado as well, and that's
one right here.
Yeah. There's I actually these funnily enough, for a time the acoustic treatment here, it works great as like you can just pin Post-it notes to it. So I
nice.
just sometimes use it if I need to have a lot of things. I just like pin Post-it notes and I like look at it and try and figure it out, and I look like that guy with like all the things.
Yeah, I'm a very visual thinker, and so I like just seeing it mapped out with the different colors. And I know there's like, digital whiteboards and digital Post-its. For some reason, I just don't. It's not as tangible. It's like, it's like an acoustic instrument versus a synth. Right?
Yeah.
Can I just chime in with the kind of challenges question? So obviously people in the chat probably know myself and Greg have been organising AirCon for 2 years, which is an audio conference for the internet. And obviously that's nowhere near the 15 years you've been doing it, Brian. But I totally agree with you. Like for the last AirCon again, we had probably 100. I think I had 100 people submit a talk, and we could only do 50. And rejecting half of them it felt brutal, and I hated it.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you on that. It's not very nice because they're all good talks as well. It's like as you said, every single one of them would have been great. Like, there's no shortage of talented people who are lovely and can deliver a good talk. But we just even though we were online, didn't have like a venue to worry about. Like, there's just no way we could have done double the amount in a week or 2 weeks. We were doing talks literally like 15 hours a day. It would have been just impossible. So I totally get that.
You guys went from 0 to 90 miles an hour like just overnight. That was pretty amazing. Because again, when GameSoundCon went online for 2 years because of COVID, it was a very different kind of thing, and just organizing, multiple concurrent live streams and for me, I was trying to duplicate as much of the in-person experience as we could online, but it's just fundamentally a very different thing.
Yeah.
It's an interesting challenge for sure. I think the biggest thing is also like, how do we make it so that people don't feel like they're alone inside of their, rooms, and the speakers don't feel like they're just speaking to themselves, giving a monologue. Right. And interestingly enough, the chat function of the live streams has been incredible, and especially because when there's so many talks bunched together and everything, and throughout the day you have a lot of the same people showing up, and it creates a kind of community on the spot, and including wonderful memes and everything, where people then really get to have this experience of community throughout. And it's a super interesting thing, and I think our highlight was for both of us was the in-person meetup we did in London. And we'd love to do like more of that, because it is incredible to go from seeing the profile picture and reading some text to then having like an interaction with someone in person and sitting there. Right. So we're really excited as well to then be able to watch talks in the real world at GameSoundCon, which is awesome. So it's so cool.
One thing you might want to think about, and again, I agree completely on the chat thing. So when we went online, I obviously had to find a online conference platform, and there were a couple out there, and I ended up with this platform called Huva, which is pretty good. And the online, the chat function of it. And then I continued using that same platform even after we went back in person again. And one thing that struck me was we still have this, concurrent conversation during the talk, which is in some sense rude, but in some sense awesome and flattering for the speaker, because it's not like people aren't listening, but it's just that they're inspired to say something or add something to the whole experience for the whole group. And for that reason, we actually encourage our in-person attendees, about half of which use the in-person app, use the Whova app, and about half don't. And I think the people who don't use the app during the in-person experience are kind of missing out a little bit there. But one thing we did when we were online the first year, actually both years that we were online, that totally was unexpected for me, is I still wanted to have a mixer, right? GameSoundCon has always had a mixer event, right? A social event after the first night. And we did that online, but we did it in Altspace VR.
Oh.
Which had some interesting problems, right? One of the reasons I chose Altspace, which is, since deceased, Microsoft shut that down. But it had both a PC and a Mac client, as well as a headset client, so you could attend without having to don a headset. And what we found is that we'd set up these different rooms, and people could like teleport into with their avatars. I told all the speakers, hey, put on a red hat, like a cowboy hat. I remember it was the yellow cowboy hat you need to wear, so that people can recognize you as a speaker. And people just gravitated to these. It was a lot like being in a live networking event, even down to, and multiple people commented on this, even down to that awkward feeling when you see a group of people talking about something and you kind of want to join that conversation, but aren't quite sure how you're going to get into it. It even provided that awkward networking feeling, which
kind of a win. Anxiety. That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, we do the what's it called? Gather Town
online meetup.
Yeah, which is similar, except for instead of in VR, you have the little kind of characters like in a video game, like old school Pokemon, and you can like walk towards it, and then it opens the video feed.
Still terrifying.
Yeah, it's also terrifying. And
technology has not found a non-terrifying way to network with strangers.
Yeah,
that is true. That is true.
It's definitely tricky. Going back to the talks, this is an interesting one. What's your general selection process, if you have one?
Yeah, so we put out a call for speakers usually around May, and keep that open for about a month. I used to have it longer, and I discovered that having it longer didn't get me any fewer talks. It just made them able to procrastinate more before submitting them. So then the way the game sounds kind of evolved, we've got multiple discipline tracks now, right? It used to be just me. And now we've got a track called the Game Audio Studies track, which is kind of a luddomusicological track. I always trip on that word. So for academics that want to, discuss, do like a Schenkerian analysis of Pokemon or something like that. So I have track chairs that deal with and decide on the luddomusicological, the academic sort of submissions. We have research track, so we have a chair for that. I added a special track on just dialogue and performance that Chip and Julie at the HealthNet deal with. And then the main ones, it's mostly just me. So for the broadening, I've got an advisory board that help with them, but the core game music and sound ones, I'm still kind of just doing myself. And then, so once they're selected, we try and notify by, early to mid-July, and then that way by, August, I can kind of have the schedule mostly set depending upon my card table.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
It must be something similar for you all, where you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like figuring out what do we have a lot of, what do we not have as much of, how can we get a balance of kind of the different, not just I guess, what do I call them, genres, like, well, it's not genres, but yeah, different types, like technical versus sound design versus VO and so on. And at the same time, we also try and make it interesting for different levels, have a mix as well of like talks and conversations and panels and stuff. So it's interesting, but I have to say it's mainly Lewis who deals with that. So yeah, you're
yeah, one thing as well, I mean, I totally agree with the same thing. We don't have as many talks like submitted as you do. So we found a lot of them are because Airwiggles is technically all things audio for media, but most of the talks were game audio focused because we just have a much larger game audio community. Yeah. So it wasn't like a perfect split down the middle in terms of the topics, but we did try our best to have a nice, vague approximation of every aspect of the industry. So we had a little bit of voice acting, lots about music, lots about sound design, lots about technical stuff. Something I'm very passionate about, and I know our entire team is, and I know you are as well, is kind of having good representation, and not just in terms of gender, but that is something we tried really hard to have a good representation for, but also just things like location, and same as fields and people of color, etc. as well. We can always do better, but something we think is important as well, because I think there's a few too many kind of conferences, especially maybe back 5-10 years ago, where it's just every single speaker is just a white male dude speaking about the same thing. And so it's nice. We're going to keep trying to make it better and improve it, but we've had like a few nice messages from people saying that, it's nice seeing, inspiring women in industry talking about it, because people didn't know that it was an option, etc. So yeah, that's something that's very, very important to us.
Yeah, well. I agree completely. And I think something we can do as conference organizers especially, and it's not so much about deliberately selecting diverse speakers as much as it is, really getting the message out to those communities. It's there's more representation in the industry than there used to be. It's still not great, obviously, but there's some brilliant people who can give some brilliant talks that are more diverse. They just may need to be nudged a little bit to submit, or how do you? And again, even if it's if you include economic diversity, right? How do I get somebody who is trying to manage paying the bills with their day job while still trying to create a portfolio? I mean, in a sense, that kind of talk can be as useful for a large number of people as a postmortem of an awesome AAA score.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we mentioned earlier, there's so many talk submissions to both of our conferences. There's probably loads more amazing talks that could have happened if they knew we existed. There's no shortage of amazing, talented people from any background who are currently doing amazing things and can talk about it. It's just a case of, we found when we did our open application for talks, about 80% were white men. But we just had to kind of spend more effort reaching outside of our normal circles, trying to find other communities and get in contact with other people who might have people. It's not that we were picking just anyone to fill the criteria. Like, we had so mmany amazing people, and women especially, doing talks at our conference. We just had to put in a bit more effort to find them, because our circle is you know what it is. I think Airwiggles is like 1 in 7 people are women, I think, and 6 out of 7 are men or non-binary. So we just had to reach out a little harder, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, and I feel that our kind of role in all of this, to me at least personally, and I'd be really interested to hear your opinion as well, Brian, is that what we can do is to help elevate kind of role models in the community, where I feel a lot of the time a big problem is that people don't necessarily see themselves represented, right? And that's the big thing. So if they see, oh wow, someone who looks like me or is from this background is doing a talk here, I can do that. And I think that's a big thing that we can make an impact, and I think that's an awesome way to be able to push diversity in the industry as a whole. And
Well, without going down the whole rat hole of contemporary politics, right? Everybody has something where they can make a little bit of influence in their little sphere of influence that they have. You don't have to change the world, but if you can make your little piece of it a little bit better for some people, then if you multiply that by everybody, then all of a sudden things are looking pretty good. So yeah, to the extent that we can just, like you said, have, let somebody see themselves as being in that position, I think that's one of the things that we can kind of do to sort of help make things a little bit better. You don't have to fix everything, but if you have influence over a little piece, then yeah, that's kind of nudge things in the right direction a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. That's nicely said. In terms of the future, what do you think like game development or game audio conferences might look like down the line?
What do conferences look like? Well, there are definitely more of them, right? The biggest request I always get for GameSoundCon is do more of them in other places. If it were my full-time gig and I were paying the bills with GameSoundCon, I would look at doing that. But it's like you, right? This is not your full-time job doing Airwiggles.
If someone asked me to do another AirCon another annual one, I would laugh in their face. I don't think they understand how much work goes into it.
I do think, though, you all hit on something that really is interesting with the regular online conference and a nice community platform. So I think that's part of it. One of the byproducts of GameSoundCon post-COVID is I went to live streaming everything. So for the last 3 years at GameSoundCon, I've live streamed 7 concurrent sessions. Fortunately, we have some nice sponsors like Audio Kinetic's been awesome, and Unreal, and FMOD and Dolby. It's like they kind of make it possible to run 7 live cameras that record things and let people view the sessions offline afterwards, and again live have an AirCon-like experience of GameSoundCon. It's a little different because you're literally watching somebody on the stage presenting, as opposed to sort of the more polished look of presenting when it's an online only conference. So there's some of that's a little bit different, but yeah. So I think this, the increasing the online component of which broadens things, makes it more accessible. But yeah, it'd be fun to do, GameSoundCon Tokyo or GameSoundCon London or something like that.
Oh, Tokyo.
That'd be great.
Ooh, that's an interesting
I was really
one.
bummed to have to miss the AES conference for games out there this year. I couldn't make it, but I would love to see something like that. But again, I think I'm with you, Lewis, that if somebody, when people ask me to do GameSoundCon somewhere else, I shouldn't admit this, but I always say, because it's a good idea, because it is a good idea and I would love to do it, but I'm just thinking the same as you. It's like, oh, are you insane?
I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah. And, because we were talking earlier, before we jumped online about, the different aspects of running a conference, and you do have to treat it like a business, because if you don't, then the passion will run out when it just keeps losing money year after year. So you have to think about it a little bit as a business thing. And so in that sense, I could have GameSoundCon be in London by hiring people to do it, but that's a step that I just don't feel like taking. I don't want to. That's a little bit farther than I think I want to go right now. It'd be fun, but yeah, that suddenly it would become my entire life, and I like doing other things too much too. You were probably the same way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because this is like I think it's always a conversation that is always ongoing. It's a push and a pull of like growth versus kind of sustainability, and also just like having a life, I guess, and personal time and everything. And it's tricky, because when something's doing well and there's demand and people are excited, you of course want to oh yeah, let's do bigger, let's do more, let's do all of this stuff. But at the same time, it's very tricky because yeah, we we don't have infinite time, I guess, and especially.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have infinite time, but at the same time, there's a danger of sort of losing the charm of what it is if it gets to be a little bit too, cookie cutter, a little bit too corporate-y. Because things sometimes don't always go to plan when you're running a live event. Like last year at GameSoundCon, the air conditioning did not work in 2 of the rooms. I was not super happy about that. Right, this is I switched to the Marriott Convention Center last year, and the poor Wise and FMOD folks were literally sweating, and it was a record hot day or something like that.
Yeah.
So things go wrong, but given the vibe of GameSoundCon, and Damien will probably disagree with me here, but it was almost charming that like something went wrong. I'm sure it didn't feel charming to the people in that room, but there's a little mistakes are forgiven, and it's kind of, oh, isn't that sweet, right? It didn't, that thing didn't quite work out. Well, I feel like they'd be much more, that the community seems like much more forgiving that than maybe like if it were a GDC thing, right? Where, if things don't go exactly according to plan, then people get really upset pretty quickly. So I think we get a little bit of accommodation.
Yeah.
Did you have any technical glitches with AirCon or anything, or did it all just kind of go according to plan?
We had a couple. The worst one was last year, actually, because we planned out our entire 2-week schedule so that either me or Greg could be present for every single talk over the 2 weeks. Except there was one talk, which it was right before the Guildford Game Dev Pub Quiz, where I was on a train from Bristol and Greg was doing something else. And so we just had to think, you know what, let's just, 50 other talks have gone smoothly. This one probably will be fine. And of course, that's the one where the entire website went down.
Oh, no.
And everyone was going, what's going on? And when I'm on my phone on the train trying to get a signal, being like, is it working? Is it my phone?
Oh, man, what a nightmare.
Yeah, so it was just like typical. The one talk we couldn't attend was the one where it all went wrong. We didn't know what was going on.
But yeah.
This year wasn't too bad. We had a couple little hiccups with like people's fireballs and a couple no-shows or last-minute pullouts. But again, could have gone a hell of a lot worse. So I'll take that, to be honest. Yeah.
I actually found doing the in-person event to be less stressful than doing the online event. Seriously. I think the reason is that at an in-person event, I know the speakers are there. And I can just say, yeah, you're in Academy Room 2 or you're in Conference Room 6. Online, at some point, you're kind of at the mercy. Does this person really know that they're supposed to talk now? And do they have the link that I sent them 5 times, but they never responded to? And so I found the online. So hats off to you all, man. I found the online only more stressful than the in-person event, because the in-person event, by the time it gets to be GameSoundCon day, there's nothing I can do, right? It's locked and loaded, it's ready to go, and I need to do things, but it feels like not as anything can jump off the rails as badly as an online only event, like the website going down.
Yeah,
right. There's no equivalent to the website going down in person. Well, I suppose like an earthquake.
A meteor hitting the convention center.
Yeah, something catches fire, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. I've jinxed myself. Right.
It's funny as well though, because last year we were very much like first time, didn't know, just go with the flow, see what happens. This year we actually took time to make a contingency plan, exactly. And that was funny because it was like we were sat down in a meeting, like, I don't know, after work at like 9 p.m. in the evening, just being like, all right, what are all the things that could go wrong here? Let's list them out. And
that was a stressful evening.
And figure out, and it was like there were so many more than when we actually brainstormed of like, this could go wrong, oh, this could go. But at the end of it, we kind of had a general kind of we had categories, and from there on we could say, all right, so all of these is just this type, all of these is this type, and if this happens, we'll just do that. If that happens, we'll do this. And we went as far as to write out like posts, emails to speakers, yeah, like all the steps that we would do. And when the thing actually happened, where one of the speakers accidentally had the wrong calendar date, and because of time zones weren't reachable, it was no problem, because we just said, sorry, this is the thing, here's our contingency plan. And yeah, it was great. It was like a lot less mental stress, because we could just follow the protocol, and that was really helpful and a big lesson for sure.
You touched on it a second ago, but something you reminded me of in terms of like the first question we asked, which is like the kind of challenges you face. For me, it's something I like telling people about, but for me, the biggest challenge of AirCon is getting just like people to like read instructions and do what you ask them to do. Because when you're trying to like herd, I don't know, 50, 100 people to do like a set of instructions, which is a little bit of effort, sure, but like you've got to make it as clear as water for people to actually go through and do it correctly, because people just like don't read things. I mean, if you have 100 people, no matter how clear you make it, one of them's not going to read it correctly, or they'll misread it, or they'll won't respond.
25 will not read it at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I definitely learned this, and it's changed the way I do communications in general for people. I am much more, I guess brusque is probably the word, right? If I have an email, it tends to be, 5 words of "Hi, great to see you" or whatever, and then it's like business, business, business. Thanks so much. Because if I don't do that, there is definitely a inverse cube relationship between the length of an email and how likely it is to be understood. So for that, I feel bad sometimes for my speakers that I must come across as a little bit cold, but it's like, yeah, if I put too many words in an email, I know you're not going to read it. So, or I know that by the time you get partway through. The other thing I sometimes learned is I'll try to, if possible, have single topic emails. So if I know I need to talk to you two about this and this, I might send you 2 separate emails. Because I've caught myself doing this too. Occasionally I will like respond to an email, and then maybe the next day I'll review it. And it's like, oh, they asked me a separate question later on in their email that I never answered. So
that's a good idea. We should do that. I like that idea a lot.
So I'm getting to be a fan of, and it runs the risk of coming off as a little cold or a little impersonal, but kind of the, this is a business communication. Let's make sure it's clear. And I value your time. So let's just, just the facts, ma'am, kind of thing.
There's that great quote from, I don't know who, but it's like, sorry, this email or letter is so long.
I didn't have time to make it shorter. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, I feel that, especially when it comes to, for us, it's a lot of it is also like these different instructions, and we're trying to systematize these processes and trying to write documentation for it. And it's kind of like, okay, how condensed can you make it without missing any steps? And because some people need like very clear, do this, then this, without missing anything. And for others, that's like, oh, I got to step 3 and this is all basic, so I'm going to skip the rest, and then I missed something important.
But there was an important step 7 in there that they glossed over. Yeah. I think that's a skill. You asked in one of your written questions, like what skills in doing this you've brought over into other aspects of your work, your sound design, and so on. And I think for me, it's the short, clear communications. If I have a question, I just kind of get right to the question. If I have if I'm putting information in a bug, it's like, boom, just
yeah. The reason I
move unnecessary words
is I totally agree with you, Brian. Like, but also I'd say this kind of writing emails like that, and the idea of having to make things really simple is obviously very, very helpful when you're organizing an entire conference of hundreds of people involved. But for anyone watching, whether it's now or later on, like if you're doing anything which involves asking people to do something, like I really can't stress enough how much I've learned harshly in the last 2 years. Make all your requests as simple as possible. Just assume the person reading it is like reading it for like 3 seconds on like a moving train or something, and they're not paying attention. Like if you need someone to do something, make it as simple as possible and make it as clear as possible and cut all the fluff. I think it's a good strategy for any kind of, not necessarily all emails, but like the ones we need like a result for something. Like I totally agree with that approach. Just be blunt, even if it has to be maybe come across a little teensy bit rude. People won't read it otherwise.
Yeah, or like you said, one of the big challenges that I've certainly found is as more people went to reading email on their phones, right? When GameSoundCon started, the iPhone was brand new.
Wow.
Like months old. So people weren't reading emails on their phones. And that was, right, you're more likely to respond in a thoughtful way. You're more likely to digest it. You can, make a note that you need to go back to it. Where, like you said, if you're on the train or at the grocery store and you scroll across this GameSoundCon email, you're more likely to just forget that you read it. Because it's semi-passive activity. Suddenly reading an email is this thing which is why you have to kind of, bonk people on the head and remind them to please respond. It's like, I think even right now, I think about a third of my speakers haven't registered yet, despite multiple, please don't forget to register, because I can't put you, the way my software works, the Whova software, I can't list them to be a speaker on the website unless they have registered as a speaker, in which case it kind of automatically happens. But I can't manually add them unless they're
I registered, Brian, don't worry. Huh? I'm one of the good ones.
You're one of the good ones? All right, you registered already? All right.
No, we did the exact same thing. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. We required all of our speakers to have an Airwiggles account. And in the submission form, there was an unskippable question, which was, I confirm I have an Airwiggles account. And we had like 15 people tick it without having one.
Tick box.
Yeah.
It's the classic, I've read the T's and C's.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So
the most stressful spreadsheet I have right now is the speaker confirmation spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
Which is to list all the speakers. First of all, are the panelists they're all up to date? Have they registered? Have they uploaded their photo and bio? And so there's, maybe it's not a third, maybe we're down to about 20% that haven't registered yet. So
have they requested a bagel?
have they requested a bagel? Yeah. What do they like poppy seeds in their bagel or not? Yeah.
Are they gluten-free? Do they want butter?
It's also insane with the whole, when you're getting talks from AAA people and you have the companies that need to sign things off, that is also a massive headache. And it's like last minute, kind of like, oh, it's sitting on someone's desk kind of to sign at Sony or whatever.
Right.
To say, yes, you can talk about this. That has been a big issue for us as well.
I'm not going to say who it was, obviously, but we had one who I think like managed to confirm it like probably about like 2 hours before our submission deadline, after like months and months of preparation, which I was very relieved for. But we had a few others that unfortunately we couldn't get in time, so we had to skip.
Yeah. Over the years, I've had a couple of issues where at the last minute they would have to cancel because the game they were going to talk about slipped 6 months, or somebody decided, oh, we don't want you talking about this. But for the most part, people should be pretty good about it. I'm actually stunned overall, just industry in general, how much people talk about what they do. It's really an amazing thing about sort of, I don't think it's unique to game audio, but certainly people like to share this cool new stuff they're doing, because everybody is still in the blazing new trails phase. And so when you blaze new trails, it's like, hey, I learned, in fact, some of my favorite postmortems are where half of the talk is on all the things that they decided they're never going to do again because it turned out to be a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think those can be some of the best ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, just the fact that, which, again, speaks to sort of the community that you created there at Airwiggles, where you've got, was it 4,000 people or something like that, online sharing their stuff in a venue that is free of all the other social media.
Yeah, it's a very passionate.
Area.
It's a very passionate industry, isn't it? Everyone's very keen to kind of share their experiences, their learnings, etc. Which is, it's lovely to be a part of, I have to say.
For sure. We've got a couple of minutes left, and Sergio had a great question. What's your favorite part about hosting GSC every year?
Besides Wednesday at 7 o'clock when it's over.
Yes, we can relate to that.
Does it go straight to work planning the next one and get so excited?
I think about 6 months. I can ignore GameSoundCon for about 6 months after GameSoundCon, but my favorite part is probably, well, aside from just meeting all, seeing all my professional friends, it's probably just I get emotional about the fact that so many people are willing to help out and give their time and come give a presentation on something, and just want to be part of the community. So that's probably the biggest. I guess that kind of happens during the speaker reception, right? I invite all the speakers and all the conference associates, and we have a separate reception on Wednesday, the second day, and that's where it kind of strikes me. It's like all the hours that people put into creating these things to share with other people just kind of overwhelms me a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think for me it's similar. It's when kind of like there were two highlights for me this year. One was when kind of like I did the opening talk, and that was really stressful. And then after that, I got to watch Alex Previty's incredible talk on mixing, and I was just sat in there, and there were loads of people in the chat, and everyone was loving it, and I just like did my bit, and we started it, and it's like, okay, we got the red tape is cut.
Right. Yeah. Now the runners are off. Yeah.
Exactly, and that was so cool to see everyone in the chat and just like interacting and being there, and the excitement on social media as well is awesome. And then the second one was when was the London audio meetup, where like I already mentioned earlier, where we got to see everyone live, and kind of also people who were speakers, people who were in the audience that we've never met before but were super active, and that was just really special. And so I think the people are the highlight.
Yeah, and I think there's playing amateur psychologist, right? There's, the Surgeon General in the United States just literally came out with a report about the epidemic of loneliness, right? People are, so online, and they're so that in a sense, when we're game audio people, whether we're in a community like Airwiggles online, or whether we're in person at GDC or at GameSoundCon or Develop Meetup, or your in-person meetup, it's almost like we all have this automatic icebreaker where I know I can talk to, suppose I had never met Damien before. I've known Damien for I don't know how many decades now. But if I had never met Damien before, I know I can just walk up to him and start talking with him about something cool, or I can ask him something about he just said. And so it's the fact that and maybe this is why we like talking about our stuff so much. It's a lowering of the social contract, the barriers to creating so it gives us permission to talk to strangers. And maybe if everybody did game audio in the whole world, then we could all have we'd all have less isolation. And I don't know, I think you're right. It's a long way of saying it's the people, but I think it's because it allows us to create new, and they're genuine, deep, long-term, right? Some of the people in the industry I've literally known for decades. And they've become my good friends that, if I would invite them to my house for dinner, or I would invite them to my wedding, and I think it's that sort of social lubricant, because we have this thing in common that frankly, not a lot of people in the world really understand what we all do. And so when we get into these rooms, virtual or real, that we know the people on the other side understand what we're doing, it's like, oh wow, somebody finally gets what I do.
I also, in a more jokey way, I think what you said is absolutely beautiful. I also often say it's, especially for game audio people, share the trauma of being at the end of the chain.
Yeah.
And every little thing that happens before it is like, oh, no one told us about these animation changes.
Yeah.
Oh, they're playing the build with the sound off in the reviews.
Right.
And
Yeah.
all
It
this
turned out
stuff.
QA had sound off the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh,
And
okay.
that is one common area with our linear brethren is the we don't get no respect and we're thrown in at the very end.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking of the very end,
that's an incredible place to end on. But Brian, thank you so much for your time and your incredible insights. This was super fascinating to learn about the history. And again, thank you so much for 15 years of GameSoundCon.
it's going to be 15 years of Airwiggles before you know it. You're going to
Yeah,
turn around
I was
and it'll be like,
we'll make it to
wow,
15
15 years of Airwiggles. No, thanks so much. I really enjoyed chatting about this.
We're very excited. And for everyone that's watching as well, thank you so much for being in the audience. There is a code, which is in the event as well. I'll post it, where you can get 10% off when you register for GameSoundCon. We will be there, Lewis and I. So if you are worried about not knowing anyone,
You will
we'll
know
be
these two.
group chat on Airwiggles as well. And that means that we'll be telling you where we are. And so, yeah, you can come find us then and not be lonely and scared, because we know how it is to be alone at a conference. So, yeah, come with us. And,
but don't talk to us. If you want to be left alone. I'm kidding. Come find us. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and the code is here. It's AWIG24GSC. And yeah, we would love to see you there. And Brian, any last words before we close this one off?
No, this was super fun. We'll talk about 16-bit game audio some other time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you again, Brian. And
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes, see you soon.
All right, I'll see you in October. Yep.
Bye.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.